What if the greatest threat to your future isn't some distant, authoritarian government, but an algorithm right in your pocket? An algorithm that knows the weaknesses of your brain better than you do. What if I told you that the most dangerous form of stupidity isn't something we're born with, but something that is designed, packaged, and distributed on a global scale every single second? Almost a century ago, as the world was crumbling into tyranny, a German pastor and theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote about a force he believed was more dangerous than pure evil. He called it stupidity, but not the kind you're thinking of, not a lack of intelligence. It was something far more sinister. And his terrifying diagnosis, written from the confines of a Nazi prison cell, is more relevant today than ever before. Not in the history books, but right here, in the palm of your hand. Think about that tech influencer you trust, the one who breaks down complex topics so clearly. Now, imagine them, with that same earnest conviction, promoting a new cryptocurrency that turns out to be a devastating scam, wiping out the savings of thousands of their followers. Or that wellness guru on Instagram, whose feed radiates positivity, suddenly sharing so-called cures that are dangerously unscientific. These people aren't necessarily malicious. They are often intelligent, articulate, well-meaning individuals who have become victims of what Bonhoeffer saw. They've outsourced their critical thinking. They've simply stopped thinking for themselves. So let's get honest for a moment. Have you ever shared an article based on the headline alone? Have you ever felt that primal urge to defend your side online, even when a nagging voice in your head spots a flaw in the argument? Have you ever found yourself believing something, not because you deeply researched it, but simply because everyone in your feed seems to believe it too? If you have, you've felt the pull of the very force we're about to dissect. That force has a name. Dietrich Bonhoeffer called it functional stupidity. And the terrifying genius of his insight is that it has almost nothing to do with intelligence. He argued that this brand of stupidity isn't a flaw in our mental hardware. It's not about IQ points. It's a moral and sociological defect. It's a choice. It's what happens when, under immense external pressure or information overload, a person willingly surrenders their intellectual independence for the comfort of not having to think. It's a defense mechanism against a world that feels too complex, too demanding. You see, being truly informed is hard work. It's much easier to adopt a prepackaged set of opinions, to let the group think for you. And Bonhoeffer saw that a person who has chosen this path is actually more dangerous than a purely evil one, because they genuinely believe they are on the side of good, making them completely immune to reason or evidence. And this isn't just philosophy. This is biology. We are hardwired for this failure. Picture your brain as a company. Your prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead, is the CEO center for rational thought, long-term planning, and impulse control. But deep in the primal part of your brain, you have the head of security, a tiny, almond-shaped cluster called the amygdala. The amygdala's only job is to scream, danger. It's your internal alarm system. When you're scrolling your feed and see a shocking headline or an infuriating video, that alarm goes off. The amygdala floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, triggering a fight-or-flight response. It effectively stages a coup. It screams so loudly that the CEO upstairs, your rational mind, can't even hear itself think. Neurologists call this an amygdala hijack. In that state, you don't analyze. You react. You don't deliberate. You defend. You are neurologically primed to accept simple, emotional answers over complex, nuanced truths. But the hijack is only half the trap. The digital world we live in has built an entire economy around rewarding that hijack. When you give in to that emotional impulse, when you share that outrageous post, when you fire off that angry comment, the platform gives you a cookie, a little hit of dopamine, a like, a retweet, a validating comment from your tribe. It feels good. It feels like connection, like you're participating in something important. But here's what's really happening. The algorithm doesn't care if you're right. It only cares that you've reacted. It has successfully trained you, like Pavlov's dog, to associate outrage with reward and certainty with comfort. You are no longer just a user consuming content. You have been recruited, free of charge, as a soldier in an army of amplification, spreading the signal regardless of its truth. Now, why are we so vulnerable to this? Why would we ever agree to these terms? Because in the modern world, critical thinking is exhausting. We are bombarded with more information in a single day than our 15th century ancestors saw in their entire lifetime. It is a constant, relentless fire hose of data, complexity, and crisis. Facing this onslaught, we fall prey to a phenomenon economists call rational ignorances. It's the unsettling idea that for any single person, it's often more efficient, it saves more time and mental energy to remain uninformed about a complex issue than to do the brutally hard work of becoming an expert. Grasping a simple narrative from your chosen group is just easier. It's a rational choice on a personal level. But here is the terrifying paradox Bonhoeffer saw so clearly. When millions of us make that same rational individual choice to stop thinking for ourselves, we create a collective, catastrophic irrationality. We create a society-wide tidal wave of functional stupidity, powerful enough to wash away truth, reason, and the foundations of a free society. It's a storm created by millions of individual raindrops, each one choosing not to think. And that storm has a name. It's the perfect storm of human psychology and algorithmic amplification. It's where our ancient, hardwired instinct to follow the herd collides with 21st century technology that is precision engineered to profit from that very instinct. Let's start with the human part. In the 1950s, a psychologist named Solomon Asch conducted a series of now famous experiments that revealed something deeply unsettling about our need to conform. The setup was simple. A volunteer would walk into a room with a group of other people, all of whom were secretly actors. They were shown a card with a line on it, and then another card with 3 lines, and asked to simply identify which of the 3 lines matched the first. The answer was always painfully obvious. But then the actors would begin. One by one, they would confidently state the same, clearly wrong answer. By the time it was the real volunteer's turn to speak, they faced a visceral choice. Trust the undeniable evidence of their own eyes, or go along with the unanimous but incorrect judgment of the group. The results were shocking. A staggering 75% of participants conformed to the wrong answer at least once. They weren't unintelligent. They weren't visually impaired. They simply found the psychological pressure, the sheer social friction of standing alone against the group, to be unbearable. Now imagine that room is your social media feed. Imagine it's not 7 actors in a lab, but thousands of likes, retweets, and comments, all reinforcing the same idea. The pressure isn't just social anymore. It's quantified, it's algorithmic, and it creates digital tribes that operate on a logic all their own. Look no further than the GameStop saga of 2021. On the surface, it was a classic David versus Goliath story, playing out on the subreddit, Wall Street Bets. Small-time retail investors, the apes, banding together with diamond hands to take on the giant hedge funds of Wall Street. It was compelling. It was a movement. But if you look closer, beneath the memes and the rocket ship emojis, it was a masterclass in functional stupidity in action. The phenomenon became completely disconnected from financial reality. The value of the stock was no longer tied to the company's performance, but to the strength of the narrative. It became a story about identity. It was us, the righteous underdogs, versus them, the corrupt establishment. In a hypercharged community like that, asking critical questions like, is this stock now fundamentally overvalued? Or what is my exit strategy? Wasn't just a financial query. It was social treason. You weren't just questioning a stock. You were questioning the tribe, the movement, the very identity you had adopted. For many, the primal desire to belong completely overwhelmed the rational desire to be correct. The group became the truth. But as powerful as that social pressure is, it still relies on a shared belief in something. What happens when the evidence for that belief can be manufactured from thin air? We have now entered that era. And this is where the storm becomes a hurricane. Generative artificial intelligence can now create audio and video deepfakes that are, to the human eye and ear, virtually indistinguishable from reality. It's no longer a science fiction concept. It's happening now. A fake audio recording of a political candidate making an outrageous statement appears just before an election. A fake video of a CEO announcing a catastrophic product recall sends a company's stock plummeting. A convincing but entirely fabricated video of a trusted public figure endorsing a financial scam goes viral. This is a profound, terrifying shift. Bonhoeffer's enemy was human propaganda, amplified by the relatively simple technology of radio and print. Our enemy is different. It's not just a person with a megaphone anymore. It's a sliver of code that can generate a parallel reality, tailor-made to exploit your specific fears, biases, and blind spots. It's a world where you can see and hear the proof for the lie, making it almost impossible for your hijacked brain to reject. The herd can now build its entire worldview on a foundation of pure, perfectly rendered fiction. So, if we are biologically wired to conform, psychologically primed to react, and technologically targeted with perfectly rendered fiction, are we doomed? Is resistance futile? Is this the end of the story? Bonhoeffer, from the darkness of his prison cell, would have shouted no. He believed that even in the face of overwhelming power, the individual human spirit retains the capacity for liberation. But in our modern context, that liberation isn't passive. It requires a new kind of training. It demands that we stop being passive consumers of reality and start being active defenders of our own minds. It requires us to deliberately build a system of defense. I call it the intellectual immunity system. Like your body's biological immune system, it isn't a single impenetrable wall. It's a complex, multi-layered network that identifies threats, neutralizes them, and learns from past encounters. It's not something you have. It's something you build. And like building muscle in a gym, it requires consistent, intentional effort. So, let's open up the toolkit. Let's look at the 4 foundational habits you can start practicing today to build up your intellectual immunity and reclaim your cognitive sovereignty. First, the information diet. The principle is simple. You become what you consume. If your physical diet consisted solely of junk food, your body would become weak, inflamed, and susceptible to disease. Your mind is no different. A constant diet of outrage, gossip, and low-quality, sensationalist content junk food information leaves your mind constantly agitated, reactive, and vulnerable to manipulation. A healthy diet strengthens it. So, how do you do this? You become a conscious curator of your own reality. Start by auditing your feeds. Open Instagram, TikTok, X, right now. Scroll through the accounts you follow, and for each one, ask, why am I following this? Does this account's content make me more curious, or just more certain? Does it make me feel more informed, or just more enraged? The goal isn't to create a sterile bubble of agreement. It's to eliminate the sources of pure, empty-calorie outrage. The accounts that offer no nuance, no data, no good faith, arguments-only tribal signaling. Unfollow them. Mute them. It's the mental equivalent of throwing out the chips and soda. Then, actively seek out high-quality sources. Use tools to help you. Browser extensions like NewsGuard or sites like Ad Fontes Media, which map out media bias and reliability, are like the nutrition labels for your news. Use them to ensure you're consuming information that is, at the very least, based in fact. Second, practice cognitive friction. Our digital world is engineered to be utterly frictionless. One-click share, instant react, infinite scroll. Your job is to intentionally throw some sand in those gears. You need to create a pause between the stimulus and your response. Why? Because that moment of friction is a window of opportunity. It's the space where your rational mind, the CEO, can regain control from the hijacked amygdala. Remember, the emotional hijack is fast, reason is slow. You need to give reason a fighting chance to catch up. Here's a simple, powerful way to do it. Create a personal rule, the 30-second pause. Before you share any article, before you fire off any comment, you stop. You take a breath, and for 30 seconds, you ask yourself 2 questions. First, cui bono? Asterisk. It's a Latin phrase that means, who benefits? Who benefits from me believing and sharing this? A political party? A company selling a product? A foreign power trying to sow division? Following the motive is a powerful clarifying tool. Second, ask, What is the strongest, most charitable version of the argument against this? Just forcing your brain to articulate the counter-argument, even for a moment, breaks the emotional spell of certainty. It re-engages your prefrontal cortex. The third tool is a mental model from the late Harvard professor Chris Argyris. It's called the ladder of inference, and it is a brilliant way to visualize how quickly we leap from fact to fiction in our own minds. It shows how we can jump from a tiny piece of data to a massive, world-altering conclusion in a nanosecond without even realizing the steps we took. By understanding the ladder, you can train yourself to stay on the lower rungs closer to reality. Here's how it works. At the very bottom of the ladder is raw data and experience everything that is objectively happening. The next rung up is where you select a small piece of that data to pay attention to. On the next rung, you interpret that data and add meaning. Above that, you make assumptions based on that meaning. Then, you draw conclusions. And at the very top of the ladder, you adopt beliefs, which then affect what data you select in the future, creating a reflexive loop. Your job is to practice climbing down the ladder. When you feel a strong emotion or are convinced of a conclusion, stop and ask, what is the belief this is based on? What conclusion did I just draw? What assumption did I make to get there? What meaning did I add? And finally, what is the actual observable data I am working with? Staying low on the ladder keeps you grounded in reality, not in the stories you tell yourself about it. The fourth and final tool in our starter kit comes from the great philosopher of science, Karl Popper. It's a single, devastatingly powerful question you can ask to distinguish a rational, healthy belief from a piece of rigid, dangerous dogma. The principle is called falsifiability. Popper argued that for any idea to be considered scientific or rational, it must be falsifiable. This doesn't mean it's false. It means there must be some conceivable evidence, some possible outcome that could prove it wrong. For example, the theory of gravity is falsifiable. If we all started floating away, the theory would be proven wrong. But if there is no evidence that could ever change your mind about something, then you're not holding a belief. You are participating in a religion. Your belief has become an unfalsifiable dogma. So, take a political or social belief you hold very strongly, and honestly ask yourself Popper's question, what evidence, if it were true and presented to me, would cause me to change my mind? Be specific. If your answer is nothing, if your belief is completely armored and immune to any and all potential evidence, then that is a massive red flag. It's a sign that you have emotionally fused with the idea. It's a sign that you've stopped thinking and have started belonging. And as we've learned, that is the most dangerous place to be. The willingness to be proven wrong is the very foundation of intellectual courage, and that intellectual courage has a cost. Sometimes, it demands the highest price imaginable. And this brings us back, finally, to Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a brilliant theologian with a promising future. He had safe passage in America as the darkness fell over his home country. He could have stayed there. He could have written books, led a quiet life, and watched the horror from a safe distance. But he chose to return. He chose to enter the storm, believing it was his moral duty not to simply spectate, but to act. For his involvement in a plot to overthrow the Nazi regime, he was arrested and imprisoned. On the 9th of April, 1945, just 2 weeks before the Allies liberated his camp, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was executed. His resistance wasn't just against a specific political party or a single dictator. It was a stand for the sanctity of the individual human mind. He understood on a cellular level that when we surrender our ability to think critically, to question power, to hold ourselves accountable to a truth outside of our tribe, we surrender the very essence of our humanity. We become, in his words, mere puppets on a string, pulled by whatever force happens to be the strongest at the moment. And here lies the most insidious part of this whole equation. The surrender of your intellect often feels good. It can feel like liberation. Thinking is hard work. It is metabolically expensive. It is deeply uncomfortable to hold conflicting, complex ideas in your mind at the same time. It's painful to admit you might be profoundly wrong about something important. In a world of overwhelming chaos, the simple, certain answer of the group feels like a warm, safe harbor. But Bonhoeffer argued that this discomfort, this struggle, this constant, nagging internal debate, that is the price of admission for a truly human existence, the price of our freedom. And so the question he leaves for us, echoing from his cell across the decades, isn't for a society or a government. It's for you, right now, in our modern world, saturated with algorithmic certainty and digital mobs. Are you willing to pay that price? Are you willing to choose the difficult, abrasive discomfort of the truth over the easy, soothing comfort of a beautiful lie? Are you willing to be the one person in the room who trusts their own eyes, even when the rest of the world is shouting that you're wrong? How you answer that question in the quiet moments of your day when you're scrolling through your feed matters more than you can possibly imagine. Because here is the ultimate, hopeful truth at the heart of Bonhoeffer's dark diagnosis. Functional stupidity is not a permanent condition. It is not a life sentence. It is a choice that is made, moment by moment. And because it is a choice, you always have the power to choose differently. So I want to leave you with a concrete challenge for this week. A workout for your intellectual immune system. And it's more than just passively reading something you disagree with. I want you to find a writer, a thinker, or a creator with whom you disagree, but whom you respect as being intelligent and acting in good faith. Then, watch one of their videos or read one of their articles. And now for the hard part. Try to articulate, in your own words, what you believe their three strongest arguments are. The goal is not to change your mind. The goal is to practice the skill of intellectual empathy, to build the mental muscle required to genuinely see the world from an opposing viewpoint. That skill is the ultimate antidote to the poison of tribal certainty. Which belief are you willing to put to the test this week? Share it in the comments below. Let's make this space not a battlefield, but a gymnasium, a place where we all come to practice and get stronger together. Our conversation is the first step in building a collective immunity. And remember this, in a world that profits from your distraction and your outrage, the simple act of thinking carefully becomes a radical act of rebellion. Every time you choose curiosity over certainty, every time you choose evidence over emotion, every time you pause before you react, you are not just defending your own mind. You are casting a vote for human reason. You are lighting a small candle in the great battle for our own cognitive sovereignty. Be the one who stands firm when everyone else has stopped thinking.